Uber has a $1 million commercial liability policy. They brag about it. They put it in their commercials and they put it on their website. But what they don't tell you is all of the red tape and all of the fine print between that policy and your claim. The moment that your Uber or Lyft is involved in an accident in Texas, one of three insurance policies may apply. And which insurance policy applies actually depends on something that the driver probably can't even answer right now. I'm Max the Axe, the gold standard in personal injury. I have had dozens of these Uber and Lyft claims, and it's meant to confuse you. Let me try to unconfuse it for you. The three phases of rideshare insurance. This is the framework that controls everything, and if you're unfamiliar with it, it'll be extremely difficult to navigate your claim. Phase one is that the app is completely off. In this situation, the driver is driving on their own personal insurance policy and has nothing to do with Uber. And if a driver hits you while it's in this particular phase, then Uber is not involved and you would have to go after their personal auto insurance policy. Now for phase two. This is when an Uber driver or a Lyft driver has the app on but is waiting to pick up a ride. In this situation, Uber or Lyft does have an insurance policy that kicks in. However, it is extremely minimal. And if your injuries are very serious, it might not be enough money to cover your claim. Now for phase three, when the driver is on his way to pick up a passenger or already has a passenger in his car and is on the way to the destination. During this time, the full commercial policy applies, and that policy is $1 million. But here's the trap. The difference between phase two and phase three can only be a matter of seconds. If that driver's finger is hovering over that accept ride button but doesn't click it, you know that the insurance company is going to be scrutinizing every single second to determine whether he clicked accept ride before or after the collision. So here's what you need to understand at the beginning of your Uber or Lyft claim. You need to know what phase the driver was in. That will help determine what policy applies and how much coverage you have to cover your claim. Uber's $1 million policy and the fine print. Uber and Lyft both carry a $1 million commercial liability policy for all of their riders. It's clear on their website, but there's a lot of fine print that they don't advertise. One part of the fine print might be that the Uber policy is secondary to the driver's personal insurance. Sometimes Uber requires a denial from the primary personal liability policy before Uber's insurance can step in. And this is very normal because many people's personal auto insurance has exclusions for when you're driving for Uber and Lyft. If you look at the fine print on your personal auto policy, it'll probably say something like, this coverage does not apply if you're driving for a ride-sharing service. However, Uber might claim that the driver's primary policy, their personal auto insurance, is the one that's responsible. And this kind of situation can leave you stuck with both insurance companies pointing the finger at each other. I've seen this happen a ton of times, and I really don't know why companies do this. They claim that they don't have any coverage for the accident, even though they know that they do. In the meantime, they say that they need to review documents or take a look at the accident report or do anything but accept liability and coverage for your accident. This delay may not be accidental. It might be entirely by design. It creates friction for you. And this type of friction during the claims process helps reduce the number of claims that eventually they have to pay out. Unfortunately, not every person who has a claim ends up hiring a lawyer to help them navigate this difficult process. And if Uber or Lyft or any insurance company can save 1% or 2% here just by making the process more frustrating, they end up making tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, an experienced personal injury attorney can help you navigate through the difficult, confusing policies or make claims against both policyholders, both insurance companies, and see what shakes out. And ultimately, if they still point fingers at each other, we can always file a lawsuit and then the real insurance decisions get made. So at this stage in the process, here's what you need to demand. You want to get a copy of the driver's personal auto insurance policy as well as Uber or Lyft's commercial auto insurance policy and look at the fine print. Why Uber and Lyft fight so hard on the independent contractor status. Uber and Lyft both classify their drivers as independent contractors, not employees. This is entirely by design. It helps them with their liability strategy. That's because if the driver is actually an employee, well, then the company Uber would be responsible for all of the actions that its employees take. Imagine if a driver is driving for a trucking company or driving for Amazon or Walmart. If you cause a crash, then the company is actually the one who's also responsible on top of the driver. This doctrine is called respondeat superior. It's one of the oldest doctrines in American law. But if the driver is an independent contractor, well, then the company, Uber or Lyft, is not responsible for their actions. And so having this independent contractor status creates a shield that helps protect Uber and Lyft for the full extent of the damages that their drivers cause. But here's the trap with something like this. Uber controls the pricing, it controls the route, it controls the driver's rating, it can deactivate the driver at any time if it wants to. And there have been many courts and regulators across the country who have questioned this independent contractor status. But in Texas, the status of independent contractor remains as the default status. This means that the legal fight over who is responsible for paying your injuries is a bit more complicated than, let's say, for a trucking case. This is why it's so important to get a personal injury attorney who really understands rideshare litigation specifically. The insurance structure, the contractor classification, and the different tiers of insurance that end up pointing fingers at each other and help confuse the process all make the whole thing a bit mucky. It doesn't make the situation impossible, it just makes it harder. Here's what you need to understand at this stage. The independent contractor classification is something that's pretty set in stone in Texas law. You can challenge it in other states. However, in Texas, it's pretty much the black letter law. What to do immediately after a rideshare accident? The first thing you should do is before you even get out of the car, if you are physically able to, you should take a screenshot of everything you can. Screenshot the ride confirmation, the driver's name, the driver's photo, the route, the license plate number, the trip status, all of the data that lives in the app you want to preserve as much as you can. This kind of data may not be accessible to you later. Uber or Lyft controls this data, and it's not as easy to recover it after the fact. Next, call 911 and get a police officer to write a report. These incident reports help memorialize exactly what happened on the day of the crash. They say who was involved, how the crash happened, and the basic facts of the collision. Without an incident report or a police report, the insurance companies have more flexibility to argue about what happened on that day and who was responsible. Next, exchange information with every driver involved, not just the Uber driver, but any other car involved in the collision. Make sure that you get the rideshare driver's personal insurance information, not just the corporate policy from Uber or Lyft. If you have time, take photographs of the scene. You want to see photos of the visible property damage, the skid marks in the road conditions, the traffic signals, or anything else that you think is relevant. And most importantly, if you ever get a phone call from the insurance company asking you to do a recorded statement, it is your right to refuse. After a rideshare accident, a lot of different insurance companies may try to contact you. It might be the driver's personal policy, it might be Uber's policy, or it might be the policy of another driver involved in the crash. Each one of these insurance adjusters have their own agenda, and it's smart to talk to a legal professional before you make any decisions regarding a recorded statement. So here's what you need to preserve: the app screenshots, the police report, all photos, and all insurance information from every party involved. Why your own insurance may not be the answer. Many rideshare accident victims just assume that they can call their own insurance company and they're going to handle everything. Nothing to worry about. This is unfortunately not true. Your personal auto insurance policy may not cover you as a rideshare passenger at all. Most personal policies cover you as a driver or a passenger in a non-commercial vehicle. However, whether being a passenger in an Uber counts depends on your specific insurance policy. Even if your own insurance policy includes underinsured or uninsured motorist coverage, it may or may not apply in a rideshare setting. Again, it all depends on what it says in your personal insurance policy. A lot of the times, it requires that you fully exhaust the policy of the Uber driver before you ever touch your UM/UIM benefits. And there are some times where your UM/UIM benefits don't apply at all because you were in a commercial vehicle. And here's what a lot of people miss. If you file a claim against your own insurance company, they may have a subrogation claim against the Uber driver. That means that your insurance company is entitled to be paid back for every dollar they give to you. And when you have a subrogation clause, they do not care about how much money you get. They just want to be paid back for all the money that they paid. They don't care about maximizing your settlement recovery. So it's always a good idea to talk to a personal injury attorney who can look into your policy and see what coverage applies. The insurance puzzle in a rideshare case usually involves up to 3 policies. You have the defendant driver's personal policy, you have the commercial Uber policy, and you might have your own insurance policy that comes into the mix. A professional personal injury attorney will be able to evaluate all 3 policies to maximize the return to you. Here's the most important thing to know. It can be difficult to navigate through 3 different insurance policies and figure out what coverage applies. That's because the system was not designed to help you. Rideshare accidents have a different insurance puzzle than normal automobile accidents. You got 3 policies, 2 companies that point fingers at each other, and a system that is designed to create enough confusion that hopefully some people just give up. If you were hurt in an Uber or Lyft accident, you can call my office for a free consultation to talk about your case and how we can help you. We can figure out the insurance puzzle so you don't have to. And while you're here, watch my other videos on what to do after a Texas car accident so you can learn some of the basics about what applies for all car accidents. I'm Max the Axe for Lone Star Injury Attorneys. We fight for injured Texans.